The second Caitlin Clark signed a short-term contract, bold, calculated, unapologetically, or own the unspoken message. Couldn't have been louder. I don't need your system, your rules, or your approval. I'm the system. Now let's rewind as chaos clock. There was a time not that long ago when women's college basketball had a single golden gateway, one named Geno Auriemma. If you wanted greatness, you went through Geno. If you wanted legacy, you wore UConn blue. His name was practically synonymous with women's basketball dominance, decades, titles, All-Americans, Olympic connections. It was a dynasty built on control, charisma, and a whole lot of power moves. And then came Caitlin. If you're here for the real story and not filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe. This girl from Iowa who didn't choose an additional path, who wasn't interested in being more, did into a system, who looked at the rules and politely but firmly tossed them over her shoulder. No thank you, no press tour, no drama, just buckets. Oh, and the audacity to say no to Geno Auriemma. Let that sink in, because this wasn't just any no, this was the no, the echo with decades of tension in women's sports. This was a no backed by record-breaking stats, packed out arenas, and MVP little performances. Caitlin Clark didn't scream it. He didn't even tweet it, but her silence deafening, especially for a guy who, let's be honest, isn't used being told no back when Clark was a high school for non-Geno famously passed. She wasn't quite UConn material, or at least that was the unspoken vibe fast for a few years, and the same girl Geno overlooked with rewriting the narrative of women's basketball, single-handedly pulling audiences the sport hadn't seen in years. And doing from Iowa, of all places. Meanwhile, Geno was watching from the sidelines, his team struggling with injuries, burnout, and suddenly not the default destination anymore. So when news broke that Geno was involved in launching a new women's league, eyebrows lifted. And when it was rumored that he tried to lure Caitlin Clark into that lead with a very tempting offer, that's when the real tension began to bubble. It would have been a perfect redemption arc for Geno, a full circle moment, the one that got away, finally stepping into his league on his terms. But Caitlin wasn't interested in redemption or oil or aligning yourself with a lead whose poster boy once minimize or impact. She said no, and she signed somewhere else on her term for 8 weeks, in a move that wasn't just a teaching, it was revolutionary. Because let's be real, that contract, it wasn't just about money or flexibility. It was a declaration, a line in the sand. Caitlin Clark wasn't as rejecting No's offer, she was rejecting the entire oh god. Came with it the system of gatekeepers, the belief that greatness needs to be stamped by certain institutions, that you have to play nice with the basketball gods to build a legacy. Nope, she made her own lane, and the whole world followed. Now here's where it gets juicy. Geno, who's never been one whole bag. I had spent the better part of last year dropping subtle, and sometimes not so subtle, comments about Clark's fame, that she was a product of hype, that people forgot what real basketball looked like. Oh, and let's not forget the shady little digs at our fans, imply they weren't real basketball supporters. Translation: the man was rattled, because Caitlin wasn't just playing the game, she was changing it. And she wasn't asking for permission. There's something deeply poetic about that. The coach who wants to find the ceiling, now watching or break through it without even acknowledging him, is not as a role reversal, at a regime change. And while Geno still respected, of course, he is, the era of the I'm nipping coach is crumbling. Caitlin Clark is, and party old narrative where coach are the kings and players are their pawns. She's flipping the board entirely. It's player first now, actually driven, brand aware, strategic is hell. Let's not downplay the riskier. Turning down a league deal backed by titan of the sport isn't something you do lightly, but Caitlin knew what she was doing. 6 means flexibility. It means testing waters without being owned by them. It means power, and that's something women athletes haven't additionally had, at least not like this. It's giving Beyoncé dropping an album without warning. It's giving Taylor Swift recording her masters. It's control, and the beauty of it, she didn't need to bash anyone to make her point. Caitlin didn't drag Geno, she didn't glow, she just moved quietly, confidently, and with all the receipts to back it up. Because when you're breaking records and earning Rookie of the Year, you don't need to clap back. The stat speak louder than snark ever could. Meanwhile, the fans, they felt the shift. This wasn't just about basketball anymore. This was about a new generation of athletes taking ownership, about fans, young girls, especially seeing that you don't have a bag for a seat and someone else's table. You can build your own. The irony, Genasi League probably would have needed Caitlin to succeed. Her name alone brings sponsors, media, global buzz. But now she's bigger than any one league, bigger than any one coach. She is a storyline, and honestly, it's about time. For decades, women's sports been underpromoted, underfunded, and overly controlled by players were told to be grateful, not powerful. That's changing fast. Caitlin Clark isn't just riding the wave, she is the wave. She's selling out arenas in cities that never care about women's hoops before. She's drawing NBA-level ratings. She's a magazine covers, late night shows, TikTok trends. And she's doing it without the backing of the old regime. The symbolism of or no isn't just about Geno, it's about every coach, exec, and talking head who thought they got to define what greatness looks like in women's sports, who thought they could shape the narrative forever. Guess what? The players are holding the pen now. There's a quiet or rage. Clark's path, a soft rebellion that doesn't need to shout, just wins confidence, impact. She need a clap back, because her whole career is the clap back. And Geno, he can pretend it doesn't sting, but deep down, you know he knows this was the moment. About the power officially tipped. Caitlin Clark made a business decision, a boundary-setting, legacy-defining, empire-building decision. She's showing that women in sports don't have to settle, that they don't need to accept crumbs and the table when they are the feast. She's not just playing for a championship, she's playing for change. So what's next? Honestly, whatever she wants, that's the whole point. She's shown the playbook isn't sacred. You don't need a ring from a blue blood program or stamp from a gatekeeper to be great. That influence is inherited, it earned. The future women's basketball isn't in a coach's office. It's on the court, in the hands of players like Caitlin Clark who know their worth. And Geno, he can keep coaching, but he's no longer coaching the future. The revolution already started. If you're here for the drama, the ball moves, and the downfall of outdated power structures, hit that subscribe button and tell us in the comments, did Caitlin Clark just changed women's basketball forever, or was, as always with game, was headed either way? The all playbook just got torched. Caitlin decision. It was like she took a pair of scissors to the puppet strings. She writing what it means to be a modern athlete in a world that still clings to old school hierarchies. I think about it. Women in sports, especially basketball, have rarely had this kind of leverage. The power dynamic has always been tilted. Coaches made or broke ears. You told the line or you vanish in the spotlight. But Caitlin flipped that script. She proved that if you bring in the crowd, the sponsors, viewers, you hold the cards, and you get to play them. And you know who else heard that message loud and clear? Every up-and-coming girl with a jump shot in a dream, every teenage phenom watching the game of in real time, because for them this isn't as a moment, it's a blueprint. You don't have to beg for a scholarship from no right program anymore. You don't have to apologize your shine or tone yourself down to fit into someone else's legacy. You don't need to be molded to matter. Clark isn't just a prototype. She's the proof. And don't get it twisted, Geno Auriemma knows that. You can see in the way he suddenly shifted tones, and interviews gone was a smug, dismissive, knees replaced with a carefully calculated calm. He's a veteran. He's been through media storm before. But this time the storm wasn't just about him, it was about the crumbling of the very system that made him a king. Because let's be real, kings don't like revolutions, especially ones they didn't start. This isn't shade. Geno has done a lot for the game, no one erasing his legacy. But even legends have to recognize when a torch is being yanked, not passed. And Caitlin didn't ask for his blessing, she didn't need his approval, she didn't even flinch. That's what's things. Then play the politics. She played the game and won, and now Genasi of standing in a very unfamiliar position, not as a gatekeeper, but as a spectator to someone else's empire. The contract Clark signed, though short and unconventional, sent shockwaves. It was like a mic drop. Without even grabbing the mic, she said no to a long-term lock-in, no to selling yourself short, no to being part of someone else's master plan. Instead, she chose mobility, agency, freedom. She made it clear that she's not here to build someone else's legacy. She's busy building her own. Oh, now, here's the kicker. Even without saying a word, she exposed the cracks and system because the moment she declined that offer, the mask slipped. Suddenly people started noticing how desperate some these old guard leagues and programs were to keep up the media spin. Began the subtle gaslighting, she's not ready or she's too young to make these decisions. Narratives started bubbling up, but Caitlin, cool as ever, she just kept playing, kept dominating, kept pulling in viewership numbers that made XX very nervous, because of one player can command as much attention outside the system. Who's next? This isn't just about basketball anymore. This is about power and control. And what happens when people have always held a remote suddenly realize they're not the only ones who can change a channel? It's giving Succession plot twist, because the real shakeup here, it's in the realization that fans don't care about legacy as much as they care about authenticity. The kids watching at home, don't care what school you went to, all who coached you. They care about who you are, what you stand for. And Caitlin stand for independence. Every interview, every decision, every game she plays, it's all rooted in this quiet defiance, and not in a rebellious out for blood kind of way. It's not messy. It's intentional, focused, almost surgical. She's not burning bridges, she just refusing to walk past. She didn't pay yourself and the industry few. They're scrambling, network sponsors, executive. They're all trying to figure out how to keep up with this new generation of athletes who don't need them in the same way. Yeah, who can build a brand, a fan base, and a movement just by being themselves. It's thrilling, it's terrifying, it's change, and it's happening fast. One of the wild as part of all this is how quiet Caitlin been to the whole process. No dramatic call-outs, no press tours slamming Geno or his league, just a cold, calculated rejection. And then back to business. That's power nap, performative, not loud, just real. She knows that her game is enough. Her silence in a world addicted and noise is his own kind of rebellion, and honestly, it's working. You need to humiliate any wonder when she just opted out of their game entirely, and now they love playing catch-up, desperately try to reframe the narrative. But the audience, they already picked a side. Spoiler alert, it's hers. She represents something we've all been craving in women's sport for a while now. Autonomy, swagger, ownership, the kind of energy that doesn't ask, can I be great, but instead says, watch me. And let's talk about the fan for a second, because they're a huge part of this. Geno made the mistake of underestimating. I'm calling them bandwagoners or casuals, but guess what? Those fans, the ones filling seat and streaming games and buying jerseys, Della Reese, in this whole ecosystem works, and they're not going anywhere. In fact, they're multiplying, because when someone like Caitlin Clark steps up and changes rules, she doesn't to shift the game, he expands it. She brings in people who have never watched a WNBA game before. She puts women's basketball in the bar conversations, fantasy draft, Twitter threads, and once they're in, they start looking around, they start discovering other players, other teams, they stay. She's not just a star, she's a gateway, and the people sneered at her hype didn't realize a hype can become history very, very quickly. So here we are. Are the old systems cracked? The gatekeepers exposed, the future bright, blinding, even, and Caitlin Clark still silent, still working, still refusing to play anyone else's game but her own. That right, there is a revolution. So the next time a coach, really executive, talks about building the future women's basketball, they might consider one thing: the future already arrived, and she's not knocking, she's already inside. We've talked about her saying no to Geno. We've talked about her walking away from the system with poison precision. But what we haven't fully unpacked yet is the fallout, the whisper campaigns, the passive-aggressive sound bites, the awkward silences from people who control every conversation. Because let's be honest, power doesn't like losing control, especially not in public, especially not to someone who doesn't play by the script. And Caitlin, oh, she burned the script. The headlines try to keep up. Is Caitlin Clark too big for the WNBA or her brand outshone league? Can one player really redefine the sport? Answer yes to all the above, because here's the truth. This isn't just about a player making waves. This is about a full-on identity crisis within women's basketball. The leagues, the institutions, the old school pundits, they all had a pretty clear idea what greatness was supposed to look like. You go to the right school, you get drafted, you say the right things, you played a role. Then Caitlin Clark rode and like a thunderstorm and designer sneakers and rearrowed every rule without raising her voice, and people are rattled. You can see in the way certain media outlets suddenly shifted tone one day. She's being celebrated as a future sport, the next, she's being scrutinized for not doing enough or not being humble enough. Yes, the classic backlash arc: step 1 hyper up, step 2 tear down. But the thing is, Caitlyn doesn't flinch, and that's what drives them insane, because we're so used to women in sports being grateful, apologetic, modest, of fault. But Caitlyn plays with the energy of someone who knows she belongs on the billboard, who knows she earned that rookie deal, who knows that is by showing up and being herself she's changing the game. It's not cockiness, it's clarity. She knows exactly what she's doing, and she knows every move, every decision, every highlight reel's building something bigger than just a personal brand. It's building a precedent. And that, friends, is dangerous. The status quo. Let's talk about a locker room vibe for a second. Because yes, the tension is set, and there to any time someone to send as fast as high, you're gonna get side eyes, you're gonna get the "who does she think she is" whispering. Not everyone's clapping from the sidelines, and Caitlyn, she knows that. But here's where the difference lies. She doesn't play for approval, she plays to win. She plays to elevate the sport, to drag it into the spotlight, and make it stay there. She plays so that the next generation doesn't have to fight tooth and nail just to be seen. And yeah, that makes some people uncomfortable, because comfort zone, they're hard to let go of, especially when you spend your whole career driver inside them. But Caitlyn's presence forces a confrontation. You either that or you get left behind. And speaking of adaptation, let's talk about the real institutions trying to keep up. Networks, sponsors, merged partners, everyone want a piece of Caitlyn Clark now. But you can tell some of them don't even understand why she matters. They just see numbers, ratings, clout. But the magic of Caitlyn isn't just in the stats, it's in the shift. She represents a moment when women's sports stopped being a side quest and became the main story. This isn't about riding the wave of women's basketball's growth. This is a growth. Caitlyn isn't just riding momentum, she is the momentum. And yeah, maybe that makes things messy, maybe it shakes up hierarchy. He enforces uncomfortable conversations about who gets the spotlight and why. Maybe it breaks up the boys' club of how these narratives used to be built. But you know what? That's the price of progress, and it's worth every awkward interview, every passive-aggressive quote, every dismissive tweet, because the fans, they're in there watching, they're talking, they're buying tickets to games they wouldn't have even considered 2 years ago. They're showing up for players they never heard of because Caitlyn Clark pulled him in the arena, and now they're staying that impact. And let's not forget the symbolic weight of her choices by saying no to Geno Auriemma as new league. She didn't just reject a contract, she rejected a legacy that once tried a gatekeeper. She told the "oh God, I don't need your lead to prove anything," and that was personal, not petty, but personal, because how you move past being overlooked by the most powerful coach in women's basketball. Easy. Become the most powerful player. You turn every snub into fuel. You don't beg for validation. You replace it with undeniable success. And Geno, he's watching from the sidelines, from the press conferences, from the shadows of an empire he once ruled alone. You have to wonder. Or does he regret it? Does he look back at their recruiting class, remember the girl from Iowa, and think, maybe I missed something, because now the entire sport is catching up to her, and even the ones who underestimated her, they're watching her highlights and they're seeing packed arenas, jersey sales roof, and into tires segments on ESPN devoted to her. Not a team, not our coach. Her is the kind of solo stardom that used to be impossible for women in the sport, used to be. But Caitlyn shattered that ceiling with a three-pointer from the logo and a smirk. So where does it go from here? That's the most exciting and fine question, because Caitlyn Clark isn't done, not even close. She's playing the long game, and every decision she makes is calculated for maximum impact. That 8-week contract is not a detour, it's a power move. It gives or freedom to keep your options open. It remain the industry that she calls the shots now, and that's why her silence is so loud. She doesn't need a clap back, she doesn't need dunk on Geno or flame critics or respond every dig. She's not arguing on social media, she's building an empire quietly, confidently, and with receipts. And for everyone was Watching especially young girls leasing of their sneakers of first time. This is what a blueprint looks like. You can choose yourself. You can trust your voice. You don't ever take every opportunity. Just because it's offered, you can walk away from the table, build your own, and still eat. Caitlin clogged into say no to a league, she said. Yes, a legacy built on agency, on fearlessness, on the fine, every box she was supposed to fit into. And let's be clear, this isn't a moment, it's a movement. So Geno, the system, the skeptics, they can side, I criticize, whisper, refrain, the narrative, all they want, the game already changed. And Caitlin, she's just getting started. If you're as absurd as drama fuel power shift as we are, don't you scroll, engage, hit the subscribe button, drop your hottest talk.